Hello, everybody. We are like, can the other people mute their microphones there, please, while I'm doing my beautiful intro? How dare you? Thank you very much. We are live for the Severe MMA UFC 271 preview show. Sean Sheehan at the helm today with Ian O'Neill locked out of his house over in Canada, late for the stream. I'm sure he'll be in at some stage. I am joined by the wonderful and beautiful Welsh wizard, Harry Powell, Dublin Dynamo, Graham McDonnell, the beautiful English voice of Cage Warriors, Brad Wharton, and the man in the hat himself, Spencer Kite, all the way over in Canada, where Ian has left us for. We're going to talk about Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. We're going to talk about Tuivasa versus Derek Lewis. We're going to break down the whole UFC 271 card. But before that, we must tell you this stream is brought to you by our friends at All Real Nutrition. Here it is. Use the promo code SevereMMA to get 15% off at eatallreal.com. They're an Irish company that really help us out. And if you want to get some lovely stuff, and this is actually a pair of sunglasses. I told someone last week, if you anyone with the super chats or whatever the fuck they're called, first one to do one gets those sunglasses. If you're in Ireland, I'll send them sunglasses to you. Here's Ian in the comment section straight away, locked out of my damn house. So he'll be on pretty soon. But let's talk about Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker and get
before you go on, Sean. Chuck Mendenhall's just been on to me. He's saying trademark infringement. Man in the hat. Nah, I'm only joking. No,
I thought he actually was there. But yeah, it's a beautiful. It's a nicer hat than any of Chuck Mendenhall's. Hold on, I'm turning my light as well. Wait, I nearly forgot. There we go. Look at me. I'm even
sure, it's like WWE. They just reuse all the characters anyway.
Yeah, indeed. 100%.
A few too many W's there.
What do you think? We'll start with you. So Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. I'm going to start with the matchup because that's what I'm like kind of most concerned about. And I know we talked about it a little bit on the podcast the weekend, but we've had the countdown shows and embeddeds and all of that. What's your thinking now in the matchup of Izzy versus Robert Whittaker? Are you still kind of on the side of Izzy, or has anything changed?
I'm still on the side of Izzy. Like I think he's going to win the fight. I think it's going to be close though. I don't think it's going to be like the first fight. I think Whittaker's he just needs to make small adjustments from the first fight in order to land shots that maybe he was close to landing or he didn't land with as much impact as he did in the first fight. The problem is Izzy's going to adapt as well, and Izzy's grown, I'm sure, from the step up to light heavyweight and losing that fight, and he can go back and work on things as well. And we mentioned on the podcast as well, Whittaker is a very good wrestler. He qualified for the Commonwealth Games, I believe it was, or a few years ago, but he's had some injuries, and maybe he's not quite as in his prime as maybe Adesanya is. So for those reasons, I think Adesanya is going to win. But these are going to be close rounds, I suspect, and this could be a 48-47 either way. But if you're asking me to pick, I'm picking Adesanya to win.
Yeah, we'll get into the picks, I suppose, more again later on. Brad, I want to throw it over to you. The Israel Adesanya's game. We'll talk about the good parts of it in a second, but we saw him going in there against Jan Blachowicz and he lost. And I think that fight has maybe been read into a few different ways, and I'll give my opinion on it maybe later. What do you take from that fight if you were part of Robert Whittaker's camp? And if you're Israel Adesanya, what are the things you kind of need to improve, I suppose, when you're coming into this fight?
Well, I guess, the big question of this fight is all around the takedown defense of Izzy. I think, as we saw last time these two guys fought, if Whittaker wants to play about on the feet, Izzy's going to tag him there. Izzy's maybe, just a little bit better than Rob in most facets of the game in terms of the stand-up at least. So it's whether Rob can, turn this into a brawl, get on the inside and get those takedowns. We saw with Jan Blachowicz that he was able to chew up massive portions of that fight when he was able to get Izzy down and get on top of him. Now, is Rob the same kind of fighter that Jan Blachowicz is? No. Is he the same size? No. And I don't think he's as athletic as Izzy at 185 pounds. So whether he's going to be able to time those takedowns and power through them as well as Blachowicz did, that's the big question for me. I think Rob may have got a bit better since their last fight, but physically he's kind of He's at that age now where, you're slowing down a little bit and the injuries are piling up. Is he going to have the same snap on those takedowns? Is he going to be able to snatch Izzy off his feet? I don't think he is.
Harry, what do you think about that? Because I know we've talked before about this fight in general, but in this, I think the striking of Jan Blachowicz led to those takedowns more than even the wrestling of Jan Blachowicz. Because if you're not able to strike with Izzy, then you're not able to get in for takedowns. What do you think? From that fight, do you think there is actually much that Robert Whittaker can take in terms of how Jan Blachowicz kind of hid those takedowns and how he was able to actually achieve them?
So I think there is. I have lots of thoughts about this fight, but predominantly I think the thing that I take from the last fight, regardless of the Jan Blachowicz fight, but the fight between Izzy and Whittaker the first time, was Izzy, his Achilles heel was also his strongest weapon, and that was Whittaker would blitz in and Izzy would catch him with those fadeaway hooks, right? Rob would come in with an array of shots, whether they were overhand rights or jabs or whatever it was. And Izzy would be confident to square his feet up. And as he was stepping away, use that side to throw those hooks. And those are the things that dropped him in the first and obviously the things that finished him off in the end. But in those same exchanges, Izzy was getting caught himself. Now, when Izzy is using that fadeaway movement, what's available? Well, his hips are available. His spine is further back than his hip is. And if I'm Rob Whittaker, if I'm going to employ the same thing and try and square Izzy's hips up, and I'm going to try and blitz in and use my timing to land shots, well, maybe on a couple of those shots, which we didn't see from the first fight, you allow Izzy to think that this is a striking battle the same way as Jan Blachowicz did, and then you shoot in when that fadeaway is coming. City Kickboxing and Israel Adesanya are famous for their L-step foot movement, right? And something that Izzy used really, really well in that fight was that L-step. But there was a couple of times Whittaker caught him with a head kick. I think it was round 2, and Izzy shook his head. But that head kick came when Izzy was squared up and was trying that fadeaway stuff. So I think the really interesting thing for me is Rob able to fight cerebrally and mix in some of the grappling offensive when he does have his head near Izzy's chest? If he can, I think we're going to see whether Izzy has done what he was famous for in his rise and closed those holes extremely quickly, or we'll see that he hasn't and Rob has some real dominance on the ground.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Spencer, of the, I suppose, the technical matchup we've all mentioned so far? Is it going to look a similar fight to the last one, or do you think there's going to be big changes from both or either guy?
I think it's going to look similar, but that's saying, I think people misremember what that first fight was because the two big moments are both knockdowns for Izzy, right? He puts him down at the end of the first, he finishes him in the second, and those are the pieces that people remember, and people say, oh, well, it was a blowout for Israel, but it really wasn't to me. I've gone back and watched it a couple of times in prep for this, and Rob has good moments, and he has good moments when you can see he's kind of trying to do too much and he's fighting a little bit out of character. And so if he's dialed that back in and is the guy that beat these last 3 opponents to get back to this fight and can make up some of that ground, and as Harry said, can implement some of the wrestling, can take advantage of some of those little opportunities that he wasn't necessarily looking for in the first fight, then it becomes even more interesting to me. That takes nothing away from Israel Adesanya, who is absolutely phenomenal. I think this is going to end up being one of those fights where if it ends early, it's because Israel does Israel things and catches him. But as we get into round 3, 4, and 5, one of the things I said today is it feels like people have forgotten who Robert Whittaker is because of that first fight. And the 3 guys that he beat to get here have all kind of taken a little bit of a, maybe not step back, but their reputation isn't what it was when they were going into those fights. But Robert Whittaker, we got to remember, this is the guy that down 0-2 on a bad knee against Yoel Romero goes into his corner and goes, okay, here's what we got to fix to win this fight, and goes out and wins it. And then 11 months later, whether you agree with the decision or not, puts on a similar performance, an even more gutty performance in the sequel, and is very much capable of doing that Saturday night against Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, I think the key for Robert Whittaker in lots of his fights, especially those 10 rounds against Yoel Romero, like to go 10 rounds against Yoel Romero, as Melvin Manhoff, I'm sure we'll find out here pretty soon, and not get knocked out is a very, very tough thing to do, a really tough thing to do. It just takes one mistake. But what Robert Whittaker did in that fight, and what he's great at, is, you know, I called him the vaccine a few times this week, but like it's being there first before the opponent throws his shots. He stops the rhythm. He just kills the rhythm dead. He's like sticking a pin in a balloon. Like he just really is. You can't do anything when he gets you there. The problem with that against Israel Adesanya is Israel fights that sort of fight. Like every third second is a different position, is a different level of variety from Izzy, whether it is faking with the lead hand, whether it's switching stances, whether it's throwing the backhand, whether it's throwing a jab, whether it's throwing a kick. He is one of the most varied fighters in the UFC. So you can't stop Izzy's movements and you can't stop Izzy's attacks before they come, because his attacks last for 25 minutes. They're just non-stop always. So I think the biggest issue for Robert Whittaker is he cannot fight his normal game. And that is asking a massive thing of someone at this level. When you're going into a middleweight title fight against a fantastic fighter like Israel Adesanya, and you're going to have to fight a totally different game to win it, that's a lot. Like, look at McGregor. Against Diaz the first time, he wasn't able to fight his proper game because going out throwing big hands trying to knock Nate Diaz out in one round is just not going to work with you. For the second fight, he had to change everything up and do a 5-round game plan. And we've seen it for other people as well. We see it, Wonderboy versus Woodley is probably the biggest example we've ever had. Tyron Woodley changed his whole game for Wonderboy so much so that he was never able to switch back and he got knocked out by a fucking YouTuber. And Robert Whittaker, I don't know if he can do it. I honestly don't know if he can do it. Like, I watched the fight today, and I just think, as Harry was saying there, it was that step back, head movement, countering inside. And, I think everyone here has said Robert Whittaker hit him a few times. I wouldn't really agree with that. He hit him with one nice right hand inside, and Easy hit him way harder straight afterwards. He caught him just before he got knocked out. And the biggest problem for Robert Whittaker there, and the biggest piece of hurt for him, is the one shot he actually got really nice was a shot in between him getting stunned and knocked out. And that is a big, big issue. What are you supposed to do if that's your best shot? Your best shot is the one that got you knocked out. Graham, I'll throw it over to you, and I'll throw it to all of you, maybe this question. What does Robert Whittaker do? How does he change things up? Because he can't strike the way he did the last time with Adesanya. Throwing double legs in the middle of the cage against Adesanya, okay, it might work, but him up against the cage, Adesanya to me has one of the best takedown defenses in the UFC against the cage. It's going to be very, very tough.
Well, I think he definitely has to make it dirty. He has to, even if he can't get takedowns, he has to threaten them. He has to try and push him up against the cage. He has to make it as difficult as he can, even grab a hold of him. He just needs to make it. He needs to make it difficult for Adesanya, because if Adesanya gets into his flow and feels comfortable in there, then it's bad, very bad news for Robert Whittaker. It's been 2.5 years since the last fight, so he's probably been looking at Adesanya's game and trying to pick holes with his team and work on a game plan and try and find a method to victory there. And they've probably been looking at it a lot harder than us, but I'm sure Adesanya has been thinking in the back of his mind, his coaches have been thinking that we're going to have to fight Robert Whittaker again at some stage as well. So, I do agree with Sean that Whittaker is in a difficult position here. He really needs to kind of, break the flow, break the fluency of the striking from Adesanya just by any means necessary. Even if he can't get the takedowns, just to constantly be looking to take him out of his rhythm and to back him up against the fence. And, he has to make him miss. And he can't be afraid. Like you said, like he got knocked out in the kind of counter to his best shot. So, if he has that in his mind, that's not gonna fly either. So he needs to forget about that and be brave. And he may end up going out in a sword, but I think that's the best way. That's his best way of possibly getting this done, is to kill or be killed out there.
I think. Go on, Harry.
I think the points you're making are right, but I think to ask him to fight completely differently, as you've rightly said, is a very, very difficult task. But I don't think he needs to fight completely differently. I just think he needs to show Adesanya something different. In the first 5 minutes of that fight, it was evident that all Whittaker was going to do was stay on the outside, stay on the outside, stay on the outside, and blitz in as and when he felt there was an ability to blitz in, right? Well, if those blitzes are blended with something a little bit different, if he tries to get Adesanya to come to him, if he tries to circle the cage a little bit more, if he tries to, and you know, I'm not saying he's going to out footwork Adesanya. I think that would be ludicrous to say. But if he offers Adesanya something slightly different, not just a rhythmic pattern, you know, we've all used the word rhythm here. We've all said that you need to break the rhythm of Adesanya, and that's one of the most difficult things because that's one of Adesanya's absolute massive strengths is his ability to set pace in fights. However, I think when we're coming to Robert Whittaker, I think he's a more varied fighter in that he has the grappling ability where we haven't seen Adesanya shoot for takedowns and complete top control and all of those sorts of things. So if I'm Robert Whittaker, I think I set up my blitzes slightly differently and I offer grappling exchanges in those blitzes. We've talked many times, Sean, about the use of transitions in MMA. Well, this is the same thing. If I can make Adesanya believe that I'm going to just blitz in for 5 minutes and I blitz in and I drop immediately to a double leg or single leg or whatever, it just makes Adesanya question what's coming. And that split second will offer opportunities for Whittaker.
It's that variation, but it's also the ability to use that variation to actually achieve what you're talking about there is the biggest part. We saw with Hermanson at the weekend. He tried a couple of different things and he gave up on it. Like that's the biggest problem. And that might sound a bit harsh, but he didn't go for any takedowns after the first round, basically. You know, and that's something that I think Robert Whittaker can't do. Spencer, what's your take on the changes kind of he needs to make, I suppose?
I mean, I think it's the same as both the other lads said. I mean, it's a matter of giving Izzy as many things to think about as he can. Because in that first fight, as Harry said, he's coming in and he's throwing hands, and that's all I need to worry about. And I can time him up. I can do that lean back, fade back, hit him when he's coming in because Israel is quicker, because he does have so many different weapons. And so for Rob, it's got to be changing levels when he can get inside or does get inside, even threatening it just in space. Make him think about it. Put it in his mind. Get out there and throw some leg kicks. Start attacking that lead leg. We know Izzy can switch stances, so it's not as valuable necessarily as somebody that's really lead leg dominant, but just put it out there that it's a thing he's got to think about. The more things you can throw at him. You look at the fight with Marvin Vettori, right? The two fights with Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori is tailor-made as an Israel Adesanya opponent because he's bringing 2 or 3 things, and that's all you got to worry about. And he can just sit there and snipe at you and move away and kind of have fun and not even necessarily be that worried about anything. Rob has more that he can offer, and he needs to do more than just look to blitz inside. He's got to make Izzy think. He's got to actually tap into a little bit of what makes Izzy so great, and that's that variety. That's throwing all kinds of things out there that make you think and make you worry, because every time you're sitting there wondering what's coming at you, you're not prepared for what's coming at you.
Brad, what do you think about that question there? Bazyan's kickbox, I firmly believe that too. That helped to get the takedowns. As Sean Denny asked there, does this mean Whittaker needs to find another wrinkle to his game to get him down? Like, how do you, we've all kind of said, I think, and everyone will probably agree, Whittaker needs to go for a few takedowns, or as Graham said, at least threaten with him. But how does he get him? Like, do you think he can just take him down in the middle of the cage, or is it a means of just tiring Izzy out and then taking him down? What way do you think he can actually achieve that?
Well, I mean, first of all, Sean Denny bringing up Jan Blachowicz, I mean, you can pretty much set your clock by that, can't you? No, listen, I think, I mean, to be honest, I think, you know, everyone's pretty much nailed it. He is going to have to do more. But for me, it's a case of like, he's going to bring this smash mouth game plan. I don't think he can let Izzy have even 10, 20, 30 seconds to collect his thoughts and get into that flow state, because once Izzy's found his rhythm, he's very tough to take out of it. Like we saw with Blachowicz, he was able to stop Izzy getting into that rhythm, and he was able to chew big parts of the clock up. I don't think Whittaker's going to be able to do that in the same way that Jan did, but he might be able to do it in different ways. He might be able to do it by putting Izzy onto the cage. Maybe not necessarily hammering the takedown attempts off the cage, but just putting Izzy's back on the cage and not letting him have the room to move. And then maybe look for some takedowns in the middle of the cage, and then maybe look to blitz as well. What this is going to have to be for Robert Whittaker is a very cardio-intensive assault. He's just going to have to come and come and come and come and just don't smile. Don't smile, Sean. Don't smile.
I'm watching too much of The Office not to get it after
Someone's going to screen grab that, aren't they? And I'm going to lose my job. Fantastic.
Come here, I'm maybe ask you, brother, anyone there. It's the part of the game I never pay attention to, but the shit talking game. Like I saw a clip maybe from 3 or 4 months ago of Robert Whittaker on some talk show, and he was like, "I don't like talking about Israel. I don't want to think about him." And I'm not saying that Israel's in his head or anything, but what has the shit talking game been like coming up to this? That's one side I don't pay attention to. So if anyone else wants to take it away, feel free and talk about that. Has anyone got an advantage? Has anything mad been said or anything like that?
I don't think it's been nearly as bad, but Rob has said, and I know he spoke with a friend of mine, Brendan Bradford from Sporting News down in Australia, talking about that first fight, and it really threw him off, and how much people were talking about Australia versus New Zealand and Rob's heritage and things like that, and putting those questions to him, that it just got in his head. And Rob, if you remember back to that first fight, kind of tried to be a little out of character and do some shit talking and say some things about Izzy, and was a little bit more kind of forward than we're used to seeing from him. And against a guy like Izzy that's just going to give it back to you tenfold and do it better no matter what, it just screws with your head. Like, it's for a guy that doesn't do it to then extend yourself to try to do it. It's taking you out of the things that work. And I think that's why we haven't seen much of anything from Rob in terms of talking about Izzy. And I know you watch Embedded, Sean, because you love tweeting out how we're going to see haircuts and things like that. You saw that he literally brought his gaming rig over and was like, this is what I'm doing when I'm not training, is sitting right here and playing this game with my dad. And that's it, because he doesn't want any part of the extracurriculars that are going to be involved, because you don't need to poke the bear with Izzy. Like, if you poke the bear, it's just going to it could just get worse. And it's so out of character for Rob that I think it contributed to the way he approached that first fight.
Mm-hmm. We'll pop back to the main event. Ian says he'll be on the next 10 minutes, so we'll pop back and maybe talk another small bit about it towards the end. But let's move on to some of the other fights. I want to talk about Jared Cannonier versus Derek Brunson. And I'll throw it over to you, Harry, first of all. Just a quick breakdown of what you think this fight will be like, because I'm not sure, really. I went back and I watched a couple of Brunson fights, but Brunson has changed for me so much between even like 4 or 5 fights ago to where he is now training under Sanford MMA. He's like a completely different fighter, where he was loose and mad and would do anything before. Now he's a more straight up technical boxer and striker, and he's really, really good. And Cannonier, to me, has improved an awful lot as well. I think he's a good fighter. I was surprised, and I was even talking to Graham about it, I think it was, that Cannonier is the favorite for this, and Brunson's actually the underdog. What way would you break it down, Harry? And maybe not who do you think will win, but how do you think the fight will actually look? I find it very hard to even predict how it'll look, to be honest.
So I'm with you, actually. This is one of the fights that I muddled over the most. I was very shocked just there that you said that Cannonier is the favorite. I would have thought Brunson is the favorite. Now, you know, Blonde Brunson is a meme, right? But you've just said, and you're absolutely right, since his move to Sanford MMA, he's completely reinvented his style. And the grappling that he has in spades, you know, the same grappling we saw against Darren Till, is now backed up by a very clinical, very measured, very useful striking game. Cannonier is somebody that has been susceptible to grappling deficiencies, but is also somebody that has great rhythm and great timing on the feet if you allow him to get there. Now, something that you and I talk about a lot is setting the pace and, you know, the core values of MMA and grappling as one of those things. So Brunson will feel like he has at least the advantage in the grappling realm and can set the pace of where this fight goes. I think the thing that interests me is, what does Brunson want to do here? Does he want to grapple? Does he want to put on a Till-esque performance where he takes it down, lands his really, really good ground and pound, his great top control, his transitional movements on the ground? Or is he going to want to stand with Cannonier and try and prove a point here? Is he going to try and put a stamp on this? You know, we'll remember that he was shouting his mouth off saying that he was the guy that was ready for Izzy before this fight was booked with Whittaker. So is he going to be like, well, actually, here's a new wrinkle to my game. You think Cannonier is a striker? I'm going to beat him in that facet. John Jones-esque, right? But I think if I look at the optics of this fight, there are more ways to win for Jared Cannonier. And if I'm Jared Cannonier's coach, and Henry Hooft is generally pretty solid at putting game plans together with fighters, I'm going to try and implement that wrestling at least early to threaten those kicks. And Cannonier is somebody that kicks well and kicks hard and kicks often. And I mean, that's kryptonite if you're going against a wrestler, right?
More ways to win for Cannonier. Would you agree with that, Spencer?
No, I think Harry probably misspoke there because he was talking about Derek Brunson and said,
"Oh yeah, sorry, sorry. I'm fucking useless."
and said Henry Hooft.
Take it back now, Sean's called you. The internet never forgets.
Fuck's sake.
He said
Cancelled.
And I just read out what comes up in front of me. Like,
I'm going to lock myself out of my house now. See you later.
You're better off.
He's in Canada, is he? Look, he has frozen to death over there, being locked outside in the winter.
It'd be like The Shining now when he comes on the screen. Go on,
thankfully, it's only a couple of degrees over in Saskatoon. It's not that bad. We talked about it earlier today, so he's got a good day to be locked outside. But I tend to agree with most of what Harry said. I mean, you look at Derek Brunson earlier in his career, it was herky-jerky movements. It was kind of wild, looking to engage in striking battles and kind of leaving his wrestling aside. We all knew he had that wrestling in his back pocket, and he didn't use it all that much. Went and was training himself. He was down at 365 when it was Hard Knocks 365 for a while. Went and built his gym at home in North Carolina, was training himself, running his own camps, those kind of things. And when you get to that point of where he was in that division, he knew, I need to go back down and let somebody else sort all of this out and have a room full of people that are high level, that are at my level, that I can do this with. And since he's been back there, you've seen this improvement. There's also something to be said with Brunson for being a little older, being a little more accepting of kind of his limitations, but also his strengths. And that's the part I think we've seen. He hasn't gone out there trying to do the let me beat you at your game or let me strike with you when I don't need to. He put Kevin Holland on the ground. The couple of times Kevin Holland hit him, he went in and clinched and wrestled right away and said, you can't stop this. Why do I even want to piss around? Did the same thing with Darren Till, has the potential to do the same thing on Saturday. And to me, as much as both of these guys have some varied elements to their game, when you boil it all the way down, it's striker versus grappler. And if Derek Brunson grapples, I think he gets a victory kind of handily.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think, Brad? How do you think it'll go before, and we'll move on after this? But do you, like, I think Brunson will win it as well. I was very surprised to see Cannonier as a favourite. You fancying Brunson as well on Saturday?
Yeah, I think so. Look, the most interesting thing to me in the run-up to this fight is the fact that Derek Brunson's come out and said, I believe he said 2 fights, win or lose, he's going to call it quits. Look, when you've been around fighters for any length of time and you hear guys start talking that talk, whether it's a case of they're saying, oh, look, I just can't do this anymore, or whether, as we've seen in Brunson's case, it's a case of, he's fit, he's healthy, he wants to spend time with his kids. He's presumably, got some, good financial plans in place to leave the sport, which you love to see because it's so often a sport that you don't get to see guys go out on their own terms like that. But either way, when they're kind of talking like they've put a shelf life on their career, you wonder, are they up for it as the next guy? Are they going to have that same passion to get up at 5, 6 in the morning and tear through guys in the gym throughout the training camp like the other guy is? When you've got a guy like, Jared, who he's fighting on Saturday, who's not just talking about winning this fight, he's talking about being a multi-division UFC champion. Now, how much of that is bluster and how much of it is really going to happen? That's for him to find out. But the fact is that's his mentality going into it against the guy who's maybe thinking, well, look, if I win a few or if I lose a few, that's going to be it for me. So, that's always something to bear in mind. We've talked about it. I'm sure you guys will have talked about it with guys like Conor McGregor so often. Does he have the fire in his belly to get up every morning and train when he's got a bank account the size that he does?
Yeah.
Does Brunson, does Brunson have that fire when he's thinking, you know what, 6 months, 12 months down the line, I'm going to be hanging out with my kids, and you know that could be an interesting factor.
Yeah, that's a fair, but also MMA retirements. There's two things I would put to that is like, is Derek Brunson just giving himself like an end date in terms of like, I'm just going to keep going and try my hardest until this date, or is he just, as Chad Dundas and Ben Fawkes would say, just saying stuff? I would probably favor the latter there, to be honest, as MMA fighters like to.
Sure,
to
he
just
probably
say-
told the wife, like, I'll be finishing a couple of fights, like, with no intention of retiring.
He's one of those guys that has
pretense to
done.
public now. You know how it is.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that has done really well and been really smart with his money. I've talked to him a few times throughout his career. Did the investment thing, did the, you know, everybody builds a gym, but it's another thing to like own the entire building and everything. He's done really well. And then to what Brad's saying about, you know, he's looking at the exit. Well, Jared Cannonier is looking at 2 divisions. That 2-division champion talk before you've got one is maybe the bigger kiss of death than anything in MMA. Tresean Gore hadn't had a fight, and he's talking about 2 titles. Brendan Vera, we all know back in the day. Just focus on the task at hand and trying to get the first one before you're worrying about number 2.
Tresean Gordon even land 2 fucking punches. Never mind 2 titles. He was awful. But yeah, let's move on from now. We roll back and get the picks later on. Graham, Derek Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa. The two of us have consistently picked against Derek Lewis for nigh on a decade now. In MMA in general on the podcast for about 5 or 6 years. I'm picking against him again this weekend. I always pick against him. Are you going with Derek Lewis? Are you bucking the trend here?
I've turned over a new leaf with the last fight against Chris Dawkins, and it served me well. So I'm going to continue on my new path. I've been convinced the new skinnier Derek Lewis, the more fit, less hands on the knees, hands on the back halfway through the first round. Derek Lewis, he may only have 90, I don't know what, 90% of the power he had before with that weight, but he still has more power than most heavyweights in the division. And I think he has more power than Tai Tuivasa. They're both hard hitting heavyweights, and they're both gonna be willing to trade. And either guy could go down, but I think Derek Lewis probably hits that a little bit harder, and he's fought the better competition over the years. He's more experienced in these big spots. Co-main event on a big card is a big spot. And I think Derek Lewis will probably take him out in the first round with a big KO, like he always does when he wins.
Brad, 2 big meaty men slapping meat. I know you'll absolutely love that. It's one of your favorite things to watch, inside and outside of MMA. What?
We need to put those 2 clips together. It's what I'm talking about from earlier.
What are you? I assume you're looking forward to this fight a lot.
Oh man, big shit heavyweights. I can't get enough of them. But look, that's very unkind. These guys aren't big shit heavyweights. They just fight like that sometimes, which is the best thing about heavyweight fights. You're going to get 2 guys, and no matter how much training they've been doing, at some point in this fight, these 2 are going to be stood in front of each other, swinging absolute lunch boxes, and we're all going to have a good old time. Look, Derek Lewis has got this. I don't want to call it cardio because it doesn't really look like cardio, but 24 minutes into a 25-minute fight, he can suddenly, start swinging bombs at you again. Tuivasa, what a guy, just one of those big lump heavyweights who gets stuck in. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. It's always really entertaining, and I think that's what we're going to see here tonight. I think if he wants to have any success, he's probably going to have to put Lewis on the fence. As he did in his last fight, get some of those short shots going. But I just think, like Graham said, Lewis he's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit stronger, and he's had that stronger strength of schedule. And he's just going to be able to find a way to land one of those big lunch boxes, and he's going to put Tuivasa out. I'm hoping we get 5-10 minutes of absolute mayhem. But yeah, man, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we can kind of all evidently see Derek Lewis's improvements over the last few years. I think for Tai Tuivasa, it's a little bit actually tougher to see him because, as kind of you both alluded to there, Derek Lewis has been in main events, title fights, and big fights. So we've seen his evolution before us. Where Tai Tuivasa, okay, we've seen him down in fucking Dustin.
He's been fighting NFL players, ex-NFL players,
and stuff like that. But what do you think, Spencer, of Tai Tuivasa's improvements? Like, I feel like we all, as I said, we all know Derek Lewis, but I think Tai Tuivasa has improved an awful lot as well. And maybe people are underestimating him coming in here.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this fight because there's a level of fighter that Derek Lewis beats, and there's a level of fighter that Derek Lewis loses to. And we don't know right now where Tai Tuivasa falls on that. He had the 3 wins, he had the 3 losses. He said coming out of it, once he started back on the winning streak, look, I just kind of was enjoying all of this and flying by the seat of my pants. I was a big kid making some money, getting some fame, wasn't taking it as seriously as maybe I needed to. And he is now. And he doesn't look the part of, a guy that's going to be dominant. He doesn't look like Cyril Gane. He doesn't look like Francis Ngannou. But that is one tough son of a bitch. And he is going to be in Derek Lewis's face from the get-go. And it's just going to come down to, can Tai take the shots that most every other heavyweight hasn't been able to take? And can he do enough? Like this, the way that we historically think of beating Derek Lewis is just swarming him, right? Like getting on top of him and just putting him in a position where he can't fire back and he's just kind of overwhelmed. Got to hit him with one thing. And for as big and strong as Derek Lewis is, you hit him with one good shot and he tends to kind of wilt a little bit. He doesn't really take those clean shots as well as you want to see a heavyweight take those shots because they're going to come. Can Tai Tuivasa go out there and land one of those early or land enough, kind of 75% of those, where he just constantly puts Derek Lewis against the fence and on the defensive, and he's just overwhelming him for 15 minutes or however long it takes to get him out of there? I don't know what the answer to that is. I cannot wait to see this fight because it's going to have such an impact on this division that is in such a weird state right now, given everything that happened on the first pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm. What you said there is the reason why I'm picking Tuivasa. I think he can land that shot early, and maybe it's the wrong move to go at heavyweight, but I always pick, not always, but most of the time I pick what I think is a more technical striker in a power fight. Because if both guys have power, it's just the first one to land. And if who's the first one to land? The one with the better technique. So I think that is Tai Tuivasa. I think if you go in there and say Tai Tuivasa is just a big bomber, you can say that for Derek Lewis somewhat. But I don't think you can say that for Tai Tuivasa. I don't think that's fair. And none of us are saying it, but people are saying it. Harry, we'll move on after this. What do you think of that fight? And have I it right there? Do you think Tai Tuivasa is a little bit of a better technician? But will that matter in the end, I suppose, is the big thing.
I think both of them have their own tactical improvements, right? Tai Tuivasa is definitely better fighting forward, but Derek Lewis has an uncanny ability, right? And you and Graham have talked about this when you horrendously shit on him fight after fight after fight, and then he goes out and fucking slams a guy and face plants him, right? But he has an ability to find a shot. He has an ability to catch timing when maybe he shouldn't. Right, but he does, and he lands, and he puts somebody away. I think you're absolutely right. I agree with you that predominantly I always pick the most technical fighter, and I think Tai Tuivasa is the more technical fighter. But I do think Derek Lewis is going to find a shot here. I just do. I think Tai Tuivasa, as he is throwing those shots, he has a tendency to sort of drop his head a little bit and leave his chin a little bit. And that Derek Lewis uppercut, you can ask, everyone that's taken it. It's a horrendous shot to find. And if Derek Lewis can see that, if he's done any tape watching whatsoever, he's going to know that Tai has a tendency to dip his chin a little. And if he does and Derek lands, I think it's done. But you're absolutely right that if Tai Tuivasa can get there first and there's a little bit more technical, then it's two big hitters. It's Brad's meat sandwich in a fight.
I'm looking forward to it. Right, we've reached the Spencer Kite Facebook prelim fight of UFC 271 segment. I haven't told Spencer this is a segment on the live stream yet, but now he knows it. Spencer, what is your Facebook prelim, even though they're no longer on Facebook, of the night for next Saturday night? Give it to us.
So before I give you anything, I need to clarify, are we going just early prelims or televised prelims? Early
on television, no television allowed.
I mean, it has to be Alexander Hernandez and Renato Moicano. Both because of the level of these guys, but probably more importantly, because Alexander Hernandez came out yesterday or the day before with Mike Heck at MMA Fighting and just went on an absolute rampage complaining about being stuck on the prelims, and how is this effing possible? And they need to put some more respect on my name. And I am just praying that the fight gods and the karma gods are like, oh, you don't want to be on the prelims, eh? And he just gets plastered by Renato Moicano. It was great to see Cub Swanson respond to that tweet and say, I went from the main event and co-main event to being on Fight Pass, and instead of complaining, I just really embraced being on Fight Pass. And like, I get where he's coming from, right? He's fought some good people. He's had some moments where maybe we thought he was going to be one of those guys, and he's one of these fighters on this card. And there's a number of them, as you and I talked about a little bit. Me and Harry talked about a little bit as we were getting started, that are in that, like, are they going to become more than they are right now camp? He's very much one of them. But I think this, like, I shouldn't be on the prelims because I'm better than this attitude is a part of why he's on the prelims and inconsistent. And there's a piece of me that's just like, hey, Renato Moicano, can you do us all a little bit of favor and just send this kid some comeuppance and teach him a lesson in there on Saturday night?
I feel like that fight, as well as me and Graham kind of talked about on the podcast a little bit, it's going to be like a disputed split decision, and Hernandez will probably lose, and he'll be even more mad. It feels like one of those fights. I usually don't see any of that stuff, but I have seen that from Hernandez this week. But it is a good fight. It's undoubtedly the fight of the prelims. Look, I like Carlos Ulberg. I think he's a good fighter as well. Douglas Silva and De Andrade versus Mazarov. There's a few good fights on it, don't get me wrong. On the prelims, then Andrei Arlovsky is on the prelims. Always fun to see Andrei Arlovsky on it. Perez versus Snell is a top high-level matchup at flyweight. Harry, what do you think of that one, the Perez versus Snell matchup? Like, I said about Snell this week, I've picked Perez, but I think Snell is a guy who, in maybe 2 years, even though he's been around for a long time, he could be fighting for belts. I think a lot of him, but so it's a massive fight for him, but a good fight in general, isn't it?
Absolutely. I fucking love Match Now, and I love Alex Perez as well. I mean, Alex Perez was unlucky in the matchup against Davis and Figueiredo. These things happened. These things really happen. But I think Match Now is somebody that just needs, you said it yourself, he's been around a long time, but he just needs a little bit of seasoning, right? He just needs a little bit of confidence. He needs to be put into those spots where he can feel like his game is evolving, and he could evolve as a man, and he could evolve as a fighter. And I think those things will happen in the near future. If he gets a win against Alex Perez, I think you see him fight a top 5 guy maybe, or somewhere top 6, top 8. And then and if he wins that, maybe you see him jump into a title shot. But I think the thing I like about Match Now is he has an ability to finish the fight everywhere, right? He does have a good ground game. He has a nice guillotine. He has great striking. But with Alex Perez, you've picked him. I'd pick the same thing. He's just a seasoned veteran, and he knows how to win. And he's very, very good in the transitions, as you always find at flyweight. But yeah, great fight. Really, really great fight.
Come on, Graham, sing it.
Ooh, Matt Snell. Can't you smell that smell?
That all you're giving us anymore, no? Come on.
You got to pay Patreon for more.
It's on the free podcast.
Don't be telling people that, Sean. Don't be telling people that.
Sign up. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. William Knight, that's the lad with all the fucking muscles who just gets tired after about 25 seconds. And that enough there makes him one of my favorite fighters. I can't wait to see that. Casey O'Neill, 2-1 to finish Roxanne Modafferi. Not to give away one of
Sean, you were like ringing me or messaging me being like, what's going on here? Am I missing something here? I was like, I don't think so. Maybe, yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, that's definitely a good bet.
In like 11 years, but surely Casey O'Neill will finish her. Brad, what do you think? Surely has to happen.
Yeah, I think she probably will. But that's not to take anything away from Roxanne. That's more to speak to Casey O'Neill's ceiling, which I think is very high. She's just come off beating Valentina Shevchenko, and she's had a couple of wins in the UFC now, and you can clearly see that she's going to be going places. And this is a fight that makes a lot of sense because you're not going to get much more of a veteran than Roxanne Modafferi, and it's a good fight for her to, go in against someone who's not, a particularly lethal finisher in Roxanne. You're not really going to get smashed out there by Roxanne. But to fight someone with her level of experience, is always a boon for a young fighter like Casey. So I think it's a good matchup for this point in her career. And look, we need to give it up for Roxanne Modafferi, right? You know, this is a true OG. You know, someone who's been around since the hook and shoot days. You know, a women's mixed martial arts original. Fought my good friend Rosie Sexton on Cage Warriors. I think even that was 10 years ago. Just someone who's been so consistently in the game and is still ranked in the top 15 in a weight class in the world, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, what a career that Roxanne's had. I don't think it's going to end on a winning note for her on Saturday night, but, you know, God bless her. She's provided us with some great entertainment over the years.
Yeah, I think those kind words you said there on behalf of 4 of us here, Graham absolutely hates her. So fair, yeah, I would agree with you there, Brad. Absolutely, 100%. For Casey O'Neill, though, Spencer, just before we move on, maybe from this fight, you know, we've spoken a good few times now on the State of the UFC address about this flyweight division and about everyone talking about Valentina Shevchenko as if she's unbeatable forever. And as we've seen with Amanda Nunes, as we've seen with Anderson Silva, and everyone else basically in MMA down through the years, unless they've you know, retired before they're getting any real challenges, everyone is beaten. Everyone. And could Casey O'Neill be that person? Could, and not right now, obviously not right now. In 2-3 years or whatever it might be, or in 18 months maybe, in the case of Chris Weidman, he was able to do it quicker than everyone imagined. Could Casey O'Neill be that person? Is she that good?
I think so, and that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing this year. I wrote about it today, that year 2 for me is not going to be as much. I mean, listen, results absolutely matter. I want to see her continue having success, but the things I'm going to be looking for this year from a 24-year-old that went 3-0 in her first year and got 3 finishes and breaks into the rankings and is fighting a top 15 veteran, as we've said in Roxy, is the development piece. Does the striking get a little better? Does it get a little crisper? Do her entries get better? Is she more kind of smooth and fluid on the ground where she's not rushing some of these things, where she's had some success? Obviously, she's had success there throughout her first 3 UFC appearances, but there have also been moments where you've been like, she just missed that. Or she got a little ahead of herself, but didn't have to pay as bad. Or you see her make the little smart adjustments like the body triangle in the Antonina Shevchenko fight. And so for somebody that's 24, turns 25 later this year, I absolutely think she can be that person. I think there's a few fighters in this division right now that are in that early 20s period that are the ones we need to watch as the potential people to beat Valentina Shevchenko down the road. If, as you said, Valentina doesn't do the like, all right, I'm out of here, I'm going to go do something else, I'm going to go up and fight bantamweight again. Juliana Pena, I've already beat her once, why don't I go take her belt, which I would love to see. But it's going to be a couple of years from now. I don't think it's going to be this year. Like, even in that, as not great as the top end of 25 is in terms of contenders, because it is some kind of generic, bland Caitlin Chikagian style fighters, I don't even know that Casey O'Neill necessarily gets past her yet. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But a couple of years from now, I absolutely see her challenging for it, if not winning UFC gold.
And that's the worry with the UFC these days. I don't think the matchmakers are concerned with that. You know, it feels like, you know, as Brad's good friend Ian Dean does very, very well, he's more concerned with letting the fighters grow to be their best when they fight the best. Whereas, hello Ian, as you join us in the UFC, it's not as important as that. Ian, I'll bring you in a second. I'll just keep presenting this here. You can mute yourself there for a second, as we all do. Andrei Arlovsky in the at the top of the prelims. That's just going to be a decision. We all look, whether he wins it, whether he loses, it's going to decision. Do you don't think so, Brad? What do you think?
I think this is a very winnable and, more importantly, finishable fight for Andrei Arlovsky.
Oh.
And I don't want to tempt fate, but I'm just saying, heavyweight division, everything's a bit crazy at the moment. If Arlovsky wins, he'll be 5-1 in his last 6. So I don't want to say anything, you know, to jinx it, but Arlovsky title shot 2022. That's what I'm saying.
How many years ago was it? About 15 years ago, people were talking about Arlovsky's chin is gone, glass chin, he's finished. And now look at him. Now Brad's talking about putting him into a title shot, but he doesn't want to say it.
No, he doesn't want his backing out of it, but he's right. He is right.
I'm just asking questions. Asking questions.
Just saying stuff. Like,
look into it. Look into it yourself, bro.
Eddie Bravo, I'll tell you. Spencer, you wanted to talk, I know, before we came in about Kyler Phillips and Marcelo Rojo, and you think a lot of Kyler Phillips. That's the one fight really I haven't looked into this week. I couldn't pick Kyler Phillips out from a lineup, to be honest, although I'll probably remember him when I see him on Saturday night. Tell us about him and tell us about that fight.
Well, part of the reason I'm looking forward to the fight is because Kyler Phillips has phenomenal hair, and I wish my hair looked as good as Kyler Phillips' hair looks all the time. He and Nasrat Haqparast are the two guys on the main card that, for me, are just guys that these are fights where I need to see more. They've shown little flashes of being really impressive, really potential up-and-comers in their respective divisions. It was less than a year ago that Kyler Phillips goes out and beats Song Yadong, racing out to a 2-0 lead and then kind of holds on down the stretch. Did the same a little bit against Raulian Paiva, gets a great start, maybe should have gotten a finish in the first round, didn't, fades, loses the fight. Now here we are. He's a guy that has all the pieces. And one of the things I said earlier in the week was the best thing that could have happened for him in terms of his career is that Victor Henry showed up in the UFC and went out and had that fight he had with Raoni Barcelos, because now everybody understands that the one guy that had beaten him prior to getting to the UFC is a hell of a fighter. And so you know a little bit more of the levels of where he's at. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's good on the feet. He has all the pieces. It's just a matter of, is he ever going to be able to put them together in a meaningful way where he can move forward in an absolute death trap of a division that's just, the minute you lose one fight, it's like losing two, because there's so many other people trying to push up that ladder. And so this is a fight that he needs to go out and look great in. I think the same for Haqparast against Bobby Green, or else they're just going to get overwhelmed by the number of people that there are at 35 and 55 respectively.
On that Haqparast versus Bobby Green fight, and then I'll throw it over to Ian for his full card breakdown. Harry, what do you think of that fight? Because that's another fight I find kind of hard to break down. I think Bobby is a slightly better technician, but I think Haqparast might be a little bit like more well-rounded in a weird way, with more ways of winning the fight maybe. But Bobby Green's one way of winning, it might be enough. What do you think of it overall as a fight?
I think that Bobby Green's style is just something that's very difficult to prepare for. Haqparast is a style that you can prepare for relatively easily. He's quite, we've said this before, and I don't mean this in any way disrespectful, but he's quite a basic fighter in that it's bread and butter hands, it's bread and butter boxing, it's bread and butter footwork, and he just does it to a really, really high level. I think the thing that was questioned previously about Haqparast is that he sometimes struggles to be the nail, and Bobby is more than happy to be the hammer. And I think for Haqparast in this, what we really need to see is we need to see him mix up everything and put everything together. Spencer's already said this, and I'm basically just repeating what he's saying. But when Haqparast came into the UFC, everyone was like, okay, this is the next guy. He's got massive hands, huge power. He looks the part. He talks well. He wears the flag. He's going to go off the races. And he's had a couple of slips, and he's moved around, and he's had some problems, and his training camp's been all over the place, and, with a variety of different things. But I'd love to see him come in here and look good against Bobby Green. And that's really hard to do, right? It's really hard to do. Bobby Green's been on his own Andrei Arlovsky-esque resurgence, right? Maybe Brad will ask for a title shot from Bobby Green as well. But it seems to me as though this is a really interesting fight to see where both guys are. Does Haqparast stay where he is in and around these sorts of middling? He's a great fighter, but he's never going to be an elite fighter. He's never really going to crack those rankings. He's never going to put a run together. Or, is Bobby Green going to be shown to be Bobby Green, a bit of a veteran, and the young upstart comes in and takes that shine? But I actually think it's a tough fight for Haqparast.
Yeah, it's a good fight done, and very even.
If Bobby Green turns up, that's the thing with Bobby.
That's
Green.
Sure.
He has been turning up more recently, though. So, I think it should be a good fight. Right, Ian, we're just about to end the show there. Go on, give us your breakdown of the whole card before we go.
Remember, kids, to check your pockets before you go to work. Colossal fuck up. No, it was a great card, and I think
wallet keys.
You're giving kids advice and then cursing in the next sentence. Like this.
I know that's
terrible stuff.
Parental guidance. No, I think he did a great job breaking down the card. I think this is a phenomenal card from top to bottom. I'm really intrigued about the main event. I think you guys spoke really well about Bobby Knuckles needs to do, and that's definitely incorporate some level of grappling into this and kind of throw a few new looks at Israel Adesanya. But I mean, we're definitely going to see a couple of new wrinkles from Israel Adesanya coming into this fight as well, and I'm curious to see what he brings to the table. You know, I'd be looking at, he's not going to be wanting to bring it. I don't think Israel Adesanya is going to be wanting to bring a big kick game into this fight, because obviously that leads to takedowns. But I can expect to see him opening up with a few calf kicks, which will probably open up some other strikes to the body and to the head of Robert Whittaker. They talked about, and Israel, I listened to the press conference or the media day he did yesterday, and, you know, such an intelligent guy in the cage and outside the cage. I think that, you know, his intelligence shows obviously by his fight style and his sophisticated striking, but outside the cage, it's not trash talk. It's intelligent talk. He goes deep and he goes dark into what he's saying, and there's a lot of meaning behind it. And in that way, I think he knows he's got into Robert Whittaker's head before, and I think he's trying to do it a little bit more differently this time, bringing the same haircut in, talking about deja vu, little things like that. But I do think that Israel Adesanya does feel he's going to get a tougher fight this time. I predicted that it will go to decision. I think that Adesanya will probably win the striking exchanges and do just enough. I probably would see Israel Adesanya with his back on the mat at some stages in this fight, but I do think that he's developed skills over time to get himself back up there, and I believe he will win the striking exchanges as well. And I think overall, Robert Whittaker will see it as somewhat as a minor success as we can last 5 rounds. But ultimately, I think that Israel is going to win the majority of this fight on the feet, and it's going to be a good fight. I'm interested to see how it goes early days, because it's round 1 and round 2, and who takes those rounds is going to be significant for the rest of the fight.
Question there from Baker. Can Robert Whittaker do any meaningful damage on the ground if he gets Israel down? Would it be just about control? I was just thinking about that as you said it there, not even necessarily with the damage, but more so with being able to finish. You know, if he gets him down in the 4th round, is there the threat of a submission? Is there the threat of a ground and pound finish? I don't know. I actually don't think there is, to be honest, from Robert Whittaker. Have we seen a submission threat before from Robert Whittaker? I don't know. Harry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point. And I think one of the ways, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think there's a huge submission threat. I don't think there's a huge ground and pound threat. But I do think one of the ways that Whittaker could utilize the grappling is you force Izzy to get back up, and as he's getting back up, you mat return him, and you mat return him, you try and mat return him, you try and mat return him. Now, that is dangerous in that Izzy's ability to get his back to the fence and then circle off is absolutely fantastic. Overhook, bicep control, and wrist control is his absolute bread and butter. The inside space he manages to get is fantastic. He's so good with those long frames at controlling people and slowing down their ability to get him to the mat when he's actually on the cage. So if he is getting taken down and he is scooting his way back up, you expect him to get back up. But it's Whittaker's opportunity there to tie him out, wear on him, make him carry that weight, and try and tire him. Now, if he tires, there's always submission opportunities, right? There's always opportunities for ground and pound finishes when somebody tires, always. But I think the primary use of Whittaker's grappling has to be to get Izzy out of his rhythm. His secondary use of grappling is to tire Izzy out or wear him down slightly. And then you have to start thinking, okay, maybe I can finish him. Maybe I can start looking at submissions. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do that. But yeah, in answer to your question, is that can Robert Whittaker do any meaningful damage? Of course, he's a high-level fighter. Will he? I think that's a completely different question.
Yeah, I think you know, it's vital in those scrambling situations that he does get off some shots, and I don't think that Robert Whittaker is going to want to come in here play tit for tat on the feet with Adesanya, because he's just going to get picked apart again. And I think making life uncomfortable, like Graham said earlier on the podcast, making it dirty and not necessarily getting the takedown, and I think if he opens up to trying ground and pound, that will give Adesanya the opportunity to get back to his feet. But if he can do just enough and create really close rounds and land just enough where Israel is not landing anything on the feet, but Whittaker is doing just enough in those scrambles, just enough on the ground. He can take this fight for sure, but
once he is on the ground, he's not great at getting back up. It's stopping people from getting into the ground where he's absolutely brilliant.
But we don't know what's changed though, right? You know, like something that Izzy has done very well in the past. I agree with you, but I'm just playing devil's advocate, right? Something that Izzy has done in the past very well is shown, okay, I've had a hole exposed, I'm going to go and close that up. Oh, okay, that doesn't look great. I'm going to do that. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. We don't know what he's done. And to Ian's point, he's a very cerebral fighter. He's a very intelligent man. You would have thought he's like, fuck me, I need to learn how to get up. I need to get a proper get-up game. Now, he
hasn't shown too much weakness in the middleweight division so far. The only weakness we've seen is against 205 Jan Blachowicz, you know, and you know, the weight disadvantage that he had in that fight was definitely significant in the later parts of the round because it tired him out significantly trying to keep the fight on the feet. It might not do that in this fight, and he might be able to continue. Obviously, I'm going to say it every week. I keep saying it is the size of the cage is going to be a big advantage to you and getting away from those takedowns attempts. And another thing is that Israel Adesanya is comfortable enough, like Sean said earlier on, with his back against the cage because he's against the cage takedown defenses next to none. And we've not really seen too much of a weakness at Adesanya at middleweight, not yet anyway.
The one weakness we have seen though is the Romero fight where it was 25 minutes of nothing. And if Robert Whittaker chooses to make it nothing, then Israel Adesanya will allow it to be nothing. I think he's proven that as well in the past. That's his one big weakness. And from Robert Whittaker can make it 25 minutes of nothing, that probably gives him a better chance than making it 25 minutes of fucking constant, you know, aggression or whatever it might be, to be honest. And Robert Whittaker might look at that and say, well, that's the way to do it. Let's kick him from the outside of the leg and run away. He didn't run away enough in the first fight. He was going in trying to punch him in the face. Maybe that's the wrong thing to do. But however, we will see on Saturday night. Let's get the picks, and we'll move on down the card with a couple of more picks as well. Harry, who will win? What will the method be on Saturday night? Whittaker or Adesanya?
Israel Adesanya decision.
Graham?
Yeah, I'm going the same. Izzy decision. I can see it going both ways. I can see knockouts, but I think it's the safest bet by a long shot. I'd be pretty confident in it going through a decision, and I think Izzy is the correct pick.
Brad, what do you think?
I'm saying Izzy, and I'm saying within 3 rounds.
Oh, I like it. Spencer?
I have the same as Brad, the same as Sean Denny. Izzy inside of 3.
Oh, Ian?
I think it's going to be a decision for Adesanya. I think both fighters are going to be patient and cautious. Like that, it is probably Izzy's toughest fight in the middleweight division, and probably will be for some time. So he's going to know that. He's talked about being patient. I think he will, and he'll win most of the exchanges on the feet, keep the fight standing, and win a decision.
Yeah, I think he'll go that way as well. I think Izzy by decision. The next 2 fights in, I'm going for Tuivasa to win early, very early. I think he'll catch Derek Lewis, and I'm also going for Derek Brunson. Maybe the finish, maybe not, but that's my pick in those 2. Harry, what do you reckon in those 2?
Derek Lewis first round, and Derek Brunson late 3rd round TKO, I think.
Ooh. Graham, you going for the 2 Derricks?
Yeah, I'm going for Derek Lewis and Derek Brunson. Lewis
Graham's a fucking great man. Listen to him.
First round KO for Derek Lewis, and probably a decision for Brunson, but that's a little bit harder to call.
Beautiful. Bradley?
I'm going to say Derek Lewis. I'm going to say 1.5 rounds. And yeah, I think Brunson by decision as well.
Okay. Anyone go to Spencer? Come on.
I'm going with the Derricks as well. I can't pick against Derek Lewis at home in Houston. He wants some get back for that Cyril Gane fight. That place goes bonkers when he walks out. I was there at 192. He'll be pumped, and he'll put it on Tai Tuivasa.
Didn't he shoot himself recently, Derek Lewis, in a home fight?
Very recently, absolutely. But it was against an absolute world-class fighter, which is the type of people that Derek Lewis struggles against.
What was that?
Yeah. And then Derek Brunson goes out and wrestles. Blonde Brunson is undefeated.
Indeed. Ian?
Yeah, I'm going for the double Derricks as well. I think that Derek Lewis is probably going to keep it kind of tight knit for the first round and look to take out Tuivasa in round 2. I think that Brunson is just going to out wrestle Cannonier. I think Cannonier is tough enough to get to a decision as well. So I see Derek Lewis second round knockout, and I think Brunson gets the decision.
I remember the last time we did this, everyone went Moreno, and then we came for Figueiredo. So Tai Tuivasa is going to do the job for me. Anything else, Ian, from that undercard, or anything you wanted to pull out that you were listening to us mentioning that you missed out on? What's something you're looking forward to on that?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the flyweight fight, Matt Schnell and Alex Perez. I think that's yeah. I want to just hear Graham singing that song. That's all I want now. But I think that's going to be a great fight. I think Alexander Hernandez versus Renato Moicano, how that fight is on the early prelims, I'll never know. That's going to be a fantastic fight that everyone should tune in early to see. I just think it's a great card all around, and I really, really can't wait to watch it and see what happens on Saturday night.
Beautiful. We will leave it there. So follow Harry Powell over on Twitter at BJJ_Harry Powell. Follow Graham at SevereMMA. Follow Brad at MMA Brad48, and follow Spencer Kite at Spencer Kite. Ian O'Neill at O'Neill MMA, and don't bother fucking following me. I'm Sean Sheehan. This was the SevereMMA UFC 271 live chat and preview, and we'll see you all next time.